Hello, welcome to another episode of Tales from the Bridge. My name is Tristan.
And my name's Sam.
And I'm Kevin.
And I'm James.
James.
James?
So we've got James joining us, and James is going to be reading books along with us and talking about the books and all kinds of other stuff with us. So we're super happy to have you, James.
Super happy to be here.
What have we got to talk about?
Oh, we got some excitement. We got to talk about Sea of Tranquility, the book of the month.
Nice.
And we've got some science fiction, science fact.
And we're going to meet James a little bit more and introducing him to our listeners.
And we're going to be talking about what we've been reading over the last month, apart from the book of the month.
All right, let's make our way over to the bridge.
So, James, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Sam. Yeah, I am delighted to be here, actually, because I remember the first time I met you guys and you told me about the podcast, and I thought, that's nice. Everybody's got their podcast these days, and, it wasn't that dismissive. But as I have listened and as you have built this, it's really... I think you have done a great job in turning this into something really that goes beyond the surface of the genre and really made it, a thoughtful and inclusive and fun space. So kudos to you guys for that.
So, James, do you like science fiction?
Most important of all.
I do actually. I am a lifelong science fiction fan, and science fiction and fantasy. I still remember, and this is going to date me a little bit, I remember walking in to see Star Wars for the first time in the theater when it was released. I was just a wee lad, but I remember walking in late, but it was a zoo in the theater. It was absolute mayhem in the middle of the Star Destroyer overtaking the Rebel Corvette, and it was amazing. It kind of changed my life, and I think we all probably have similar stories to tell. But I will confess to being a bit of a surface level fan. The big genre IPs like Star Wars and Star Trek and Battlestar Galactica and Blade Runner. Those are a lot of movies, and I am a TV producer, so that those all pushed me in that direction. But I am really excited to journey with you guys and learn more and dive deeper into the genre and read books by authors I may not have heard of before, and that's already happened. So I'm excited to expand my horizons and my universe, if you will. So I'm looking forward to it. Thank you.
Awesome. That's great.
Nice.
Awesome.
So I've got something for you guys. Do you remember back in maybe 2016, 2017, there was a bit of fanfare with Stephen Hawking and who was still alive at the time, and Mark Zuckerberg and some other rich folk. And they made this announcement that they were starting an organization that was going to try to send microsatellites to a nearby star. And then that kind of petered off and just kind of went nowhere. And anyway, so for those of you who don't remember this, do you guys remember this? Do you guys have any memory of this at all, or no?
Vaguely.
I do. I remember it. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you know what happened?
No.
They didn't get to the star. Just in case that's like spoiler alert. But what has been happening is they've been working since 2016 with $100 million worth of funding on building a plan to get this, have 1 inch, just a few microsatellites that are about 1 inch in size, a few grams in weight, that have some type of a solar sail that would travel through interstellar space to Proxima Centauri, which is a planet in the Alpha Centauri system, which is far, right? This thing it's 4 light years away at least. And so people think, well, how could it ever get there in time for it to be relevant to us and to our children and to what have you? But they suggested that they could accelerate these things to 10 to 20% of the speed of light and get there in 20 years. So that's what got everybody all excited. And the way that they would do this is each of these little tiny spacecrafts would have a solar sail, and then on the Earth there would be enormous lasers that would shoot at these things and basically accelerate them up within 10 seconds up to 10 to 20% of the speed of light, which sounds absurd, but apparently it is theoretically possible. And they would shoot out a plume of 1,000 of them, and they would just zap them from Earth, and they would all accelerate, and hopefully one or two of those 1,000 would make it through interstellar space and wouldn't collide with rogue hydrogen particles or other debris as they're zipping through space, and then get there, take pictures, and as they're whizzing through this as the solar system at extreme speed, take photos and send it back home. So anyway, that was the principle. It sounded really cool. So I went in and I did a little bit of a deep dive to figure out where this is at. And it hasn't just kind of, petered off. The people are still spending money, and they have a list of engineering problems that they're trying to solve. And it's called the Breakthrough Starshot. That's the name of this endeavor. And it's really just another one of these privately funded, cool space projects. But anyway, I wanted to share that because I thought it was really neat at the time, and I promptly forgot all about it. And I thought about it the other day, and I thought it might be interesting to others. So anyway, and Stephen Hawking is dead, unfortunately, but Mark Zuckerberg's still around, and another one of the funders, I believe, is Yuri Milner, a Russian rich dude who's funding this as well. What do you guys think about this? Should we just be sending microsatellites? Should we bother with large ones?
I love the idea of crossing that much distance that quickly. Like, that really is the compelling part for me, that you get there in 20 years. The idea of boosting solar sails with lasers is genius. Like, it's like I love that concept as well, because when we talk about solar sails, it's always the last. When we talk about FTL drives and all the sort of stuff that we read in the sci-fi books that we cover, solar sails are rarely used because they feel slow, and
it's the ghetto transportation of space travel.
Yeah, exactly. It's that crappy blanket that you keep in your car, and it's not that compelling, right? But suddenly, when you can boost it with a laser, I think maybe just adding the whole laser concept to anything makes it cooler. So maybe that's where I'm getting enthusiastic. But either way, I love that idea. Not the idea that something small and fast, send back photos, let's just get some evidence, is a really great idea. Like, just as a fact finding mission as well. Like, yeah, I couldn't find anything. I couldn't come up with a problem with this at all. It's really
a swarm,
cool
right?
idea.
Like sending a swarm of them too.
Yeah,
it's neat. It's just, we don't do that with space travel, so it's kind of a cool concept.
Zuckerberg, is he just he's just funding, or does he have an agenda himself for this?
I think only it was just to add money into it. Yeah, and he thought it was an interesting project.
I wonder how they'll slow them down on the other end. Consider if even one of them from the swarm actually makes it there, like, they'll need to slow down. I'm sure
I don't think they will.
Have...
They're just going to zip on through. Yep, going to zip on through and try to take photos as they're going at 10 to 20% the speed of light. That's the plan.
Yeah, I'm kind of with Sam. I think there's no reason not to do this. It sounds smart and efficient, and if they could make it happen, I think it's great.
It kind of reminds me of the swarm of little satellites from Peter Watts. I'm not sure how big his satellites were, but remember the swarm went around Earth, and they were all small satellites.
Mm-hmm.
It reminds me of that, because now you've a swarm of satellites.
Yeah. Anyway,
and Centauri is definitely where we're going first, no matter what it is, right? Like, whatever planet we're going to, it's out of our solar system. It's going to be in the Alpha Centauri system for sure.
Well, it's got to be close, and it's got to be interesting, and I guess that's the criteria.
Well, have you guys been reading anything interesting besides Sea of Tranquility, the book of the month?
Ever wondered what it takes to make it in the movie business? Peel back the curtain with 4-6 Success Filmmaking. 4-6 Success Filmmaking is where filmmakers share their stories and the secrets.
It's beyond competitive out there.
There have been movies that it's taken me 10 years to get made.
Don't wait to create. Like, you've got to just keep making stuff.
Tune in to 4-6 Success Filmmaking for your dose of cinematic realness, direct from the voices that have lived it.
I have. Yes, I have an exciting one. Those of you who know one of our past guests, Martha Wells, will know that she has put out a new Murderbot book, and it was released just recently. It's called System Collapse, and it's the latest in the Murderbot series. It's a full-length novel, and I've been listening to it. I because I listen to most of my books these days. I got about 30 minutes left. It's good. Yeah, it's if you like the Murderbot series, this is more of the same. I think it's better. I think it might be getting better. I was really surprised when her last book won the Hugo, because I thought it was a good romp, but I didn't think that it was kind of Hugo winning quality. I think this is a better book than that one. So yeah, I mean that was Network Effect, and that was out in 2020, and System Collapse just came out this year. But I've been really enjoying it. I highly recommend it to anybody who likes that series.
I've seen that this one pop up a lot in my little groups online, and yep, I'll get to that one for sure.
I just downloaded that one, so that's my next read after this month's book for sure.
Sam, do you read anything else?
I just finished a big ship at the end of the universe. Sorry, at the edge, a big ship at the edge of the universe. I had this problem. I was trying to decide whether or not I liked this book as I was midway through it last time we were talking, and I'm still unsure. It's okay, I think, is maybe what I just have to say. And yeah, then I just downloaded System Collapse, so that's sort of like my next read.
James, did you have one or?
Well, I do. Aside from Sea of Tranquility, which we'll be discussing shortly, and I've mentioned this one to you guys before, and as the new guy, I'm going to take some liberty with the format here, but it was just such a great read that I'm going to put it out there, and I think it may have, if it's not sci-fi per se, but it may have some adjacent interest. And that was Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow by Gabrielle Zevin. And it's a book, in short, about friendship and video games, and set in the world of video game development and publishing. And my wife got me to read it. I didn't know about it, but she got me to read it, twisted my rubber arm, and it was so captivating right off the bat, so authentic. And Zevin, and I hope I'm pronouncing her name properly, but it was so authentic and felt so real. And part of that maybe just because it was sort of a similar time frame of my life as well too, so I could relate a lot to the characters. But again, it was also one of those books that when it was over, even though the characters all have their own idiosyncrasies, and some of them, are not so, none of them are perfect. It feels like you don't want to let them go, because you want them to be your friends going forward, and at the end of the book, you realize, well, that's the end. But it was really delightful, and the video game element was really fun, and relatable to anyone who grew up in that world like I did. So yeah, again, not hard sci-fi, but maybe have some adjacent interest to the listeners and you guys.
Yeah.
But again, it's highly recommended. Just a lovely, great book.
It does
great
look
reviews.
Sci-fi adjacent. Yeah, I agree, Tristan.
Yeah.
I was just looking at the reviews as well. High ratings on Goodreads 4.2, 630,000 ratings. That's a pretty popular book.
Well, I actually read a couple of classics. One, it was a revisit, The Left Hand of Darkness by Ursula K. Le Guin, which was one I read probably 20 years ago. So it was really neat to read it now because the themes are pretty interesting to read now. It's a beautiful book by the end, like really just gorgeous book. So Left Hand of Darkness is one of those books that they say every sci-fi fan should read. So thought it was due for a revisit. And yeah, it's one of those ones, if it's been a while, go for that one as well. And then the other one has been recommended for years. My brother's been telling me to read this for years. My buddy's been telling me. And then we had someone at Fan Expo that recommended the series. So I read the first book, Rendezvous with Rama by Arthur C. Clarke. It's good. It's really good. I definitely want to go further into the world. I hear the series just gets better because it was just the exploration of Rama. And learning about how it works and the gravity and just humans having a first contact with this species. We don't really know who's in charge. We really don't know anything. Even by the end of the book, you still know very little about what's going on. But at the same time, you do learn a whole bunch about what the physics of the cylinder, how it works, and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, that was Rendezvous with Rama was the first one, and I will definitely go further into that series because I hear that it just gets more plot based and sci-fi, and I think Kevin's read this one.
Yeah. Yeah, Rendezvous with Rama. That's a funny one. It's I actually really enjoyed it, but this is for people who really like an exploration of science concepts where you're thinking, "Oh, that's interesting. How does that work?" And then the author explores it and works with it. And Arthur C. Clarke, that was his thing, right? He with Rama had, as far as I know, almost no character development and virtually no plot. It was really all about the exploration of the physics of that thing. And so it was, I loved it. I personally thought it was great. There's this weird cult following for books like that. And I think I'm in that cult, maybe. But certainly it's not for everybody, is it? Okay, so our book of the month was my pick this past month, and it was Sea of Tranquility by Emily St. John Mandel. This is a Canadian author who has some notoriety with her book Station 11, which was made into a television series, an excellent television series. And I was really excited to hear about this book. It won the Goodreads Choice Awards as Best Science Fiction for 2022. It had some other notoriety as well. For example, the for some reason, Obama has a list of books that people seem to like. He said that this was one of his favorite books, and it's had some good critical acclaim. So I thought that I would suggest it. It's rare that I suggest a book that I've never read before, though. So this was a book that I had not read. I was intrigued to read it, and because it had a couple concepts that I thought were really cool. In when I was reading about the plot before I read the book, and one was it was talking about this simulation hypothesis that it explores the concept that we live in a simulation, and we've talked about that on this show many times. And the other one is that of time travel and mixes the two. So I thought it would be really cool, and it was a good book. I really enjoyed it. I thought that I thought it was well written. I thought that the storyline, there were several plots that all kind of interweaved, and the characters were accessible, uh, and I felt as though that I didn't really care that much about the characters. I don't know about you guys, and normally I'm not a character guy. Normally I'd say I'm in a science fiction book for the ideas. The characters are secondary to me, but this book had a lot of. I definitely got to know Gasperi by the end of the book. Certainly, that character was well developed, and I really liked him near the end. But I mean, Edwin. Do you guys remember in 1912 the earliest character? Whatever happened to him? He was kind of important, and then he was just discarded. And and I did like how it was kind of tied up in a nice bow at the end of the book, but it felt like I needed more. So maybe there's I don't know how they could make a second book in this series, but I felt like I needed a little bit more. I felt like there was some more writing that needed to happen in this one. So overall, I enjoyed it. But I don't know if I would have recommended it if I had read it first. Quite honestly, it's not the type of book that I would typically recommend. And I'm not bashing this book, just to be clear. It's just not the type of book that I would usually recommend. So I hope you guys enjoyed it. I enjoyed it. But those were my thoughts on the book. What did you guys think?
I'll just start off. Spoiler: I really like this book. So much of what we've read or what we read has this sort of movie script quality to it, and this was just a beautifully written story and kind of a refreshing read for me. Time travel is a really tough thing to write well and is kind of infamous in that regard. And this story really brings that to the surface, particularly when you think about what had to go into writing it. This is not a linear arc. In order for it to work, it had to be written in 3 dimensions. And I can't imagine how complicated this was to put together. Yet the approach was beautifully understated, and Emily makes it look easy. And I think maybe that's where, Kevin, you feel like it was underwritten in a way. I thought that kind of worked. I thought this book is a deftly crafted pearl of the subgenre. It really, for me, was this pleasant, clever sci-fi reading experience that I didn't know I needed. I have no criticism of this book, only a reliable recommendation for anyone who asks. Also, I thought Gasbury was like, that's a fantastic name for a character. And for a book like this, it's almost a requirement to help the reader navigate the twists and turns of the storyline. And I did love this idea of us living in a simulation and the kind of conclusion that they bring around to that. I thought was kind of lovely as well, but I won't spoil that. And there's also just another element I had, like, kind of I enjoyed, was this idea, this premise that all organizations have self-preservation at any cost as their sort of unspoken mission, vision, and value statement, and what that kind of interplay brings into the story, and how it relates to us being in a sort of simulation, and the idea of maybe not making a big deal of it, if it means the downfall of your organization. Anyways, all of those sort of elements really, I thought, were elegantly done. Anyways, I'll leave it at that. I was 10 out of 10 on this one if we were ever do a number scale. But I totally agree with what you're saying there, Kevin. I could see where you're left looking for a little more. I don't, but yeah, I was kind of okay with it.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah, this is a really good book. Glad it was recommended. Good pick. I haven't read anything by Emily before, so this was a good little intro. It didn't excite me that much. I wasn't really excited to go back every time that I was approaching it. The concept is neat. However, that jumping back of the timeline thing, I just feel like that's been done quite a bit. It's an easy way to keep a secret that is a twist at the end, because there's a twist at the end that I don't think we're going to spoil, unless we are going to spoil, but I won't be the one to do it. But yeah, it's a plot of, or it's a device for writers to reveal a story later on. So it was a little bit like, okay, I wasn't that blown away by that twist. So if it was supposed to be like a whoa, it didn't really hit me. If we're in a simulation, then of course there's going to be a hack. There's going to be time travel. You would think. If it's a simulation, that means that there's structure, and therefore you'd be able to do different things. So that's kind of, it's neat, but it's also it sounds like I'm kind of being a bit soft on it, to be honest. I wasn't bored, but it wasn't the sci-fi we usually read. It was definitely more literature. I have an English teacher whom I adore, and she got me into reading and got me into so many other things. She definitely does not read sci-fi. Next time I see her, if she says, "Is there a sci-fi book I should read?" I'll recommend this one, because it's a gateway for someone who prefers literature and to get a little taste of sci-fi. But there were no ideas that really exercised my creativity and my thoughts on what was going on. So, and the characters, yeah, they were all right. I didn't get too warmed up to them. However, there's a lot of good in this book. The writing is very good. It's simple but beautiful. I do appreciate the writing, and the story had some beautiful little character connections, and there was the atmosphere of this book, the environment, and the feelings were well established. So I mean, she's an amazing writer, obviously. A lot of people like what she's doing with her books. I think this is number 6 for her, 5 or 6. So she's definitely crafting her skills, and I liked it. Wasn't completely blown away by it, but that's okay. It was a beautiful book, more on the literature side than the sci-fi, and I would recommend this book, but not to someone who was asking for like a good sci-fi book. This would be a recommendation for someone who was maybe taking their first couple steps into sci-fi or something like that, and preferred other stuff. But overall, very good book. Not necessarily for me, but great pick. I'm totally happy to have read it. I thought it was good, and
Good.
yeah,
Great. What about you, James?
Well, I think, Tristan, you summed it up really well, that this is a piece of literature with tastes of sci-fi or touches of sci-fi in it. And it was a slow burn for me a little bit, until I kind of realized what we were dealing with. And I realized that it is the kind of book that I am looking forward to being exposed to on this podcast. It isn't the kind of thing I would have ordinarily picked up. I must confess, I don't know of Emily St. John Mandel. But I do also agree that she's a beautiful writer. It did take me a while to get into it, and I was a little thrown by without giving things away and spoiling things, the abandonment of characters as we move through the story. It disjointed me a little bit, but once I could see that that's where we were going, I got on board. Funnily enough, I kind of see this book as being, in its own way, a bit of a time travel tale, in the sense that I think if you went back and read it again, which is kind of a bit of time travel, that you would see all those things and it would come out, and you'd get, I'm tempted to do that. Actually, I'm tempted to read it again to make sense of some of the things that didn't make sense the first time through. I also think Gaspard Jacques was a great, interesting character that, I could have easily followed through, but to have your main character introduced so late in the story is an interesting choice as well too. I liked it by the end, and after I thought about it again, it was a slow burn, and I thought about it and I thought, there's more to this. She's saying more. And at first I couldn't quite figure out what it meant, but then I started thinking about how she put it together, and I flipped through it, and it was interesting too and tell me what you guys think about this theory, that there were some things in the book that I thought were oddly highlighted. Like, there was one chapter where there were a lot of descriptions of hotel rooms, and there were other descriptions of moon colonies and other things. And then I started realize, or again, this is maybe my pompous kind of idea, that what is a hotel if not a simulation of home?
Hmm.
And what is the moon colony other than a simulation of Earth? There's mention of a bonsai tree in someone's office later on, but that's kind of a simulation, a forced guided simulation of a tree as well too. So once I tweaked to those kind of things, I thought, okay, she's working this, like, she's thinking about this. And I also appreciated too, further to the sort of soft sci-fi idea, that she focused on the human impact of the technology of time travel. It wasn't about the nuts and bolts and the how do we make this unfeasible technology work. It was just, what is this going to do to us, and what do we do with it? I enjoyed it. It did. Was it my favorite read of all time? Probably not. I could actually see the way she left it. I could see her opening up a whole world with it if she wanted to, but I don't think she's going to. I think this is going to be a bit of an ET for her. Like, why would you go back? It's kind of good the way it is. But I also appreciated how she made things relatable and seem real. That even when we're talking, or when she was describing life on a moon colony, it felt real and relatable. And there was, a COVID-19 reference and then a future pandemic reference, which for me inherently amped up the tension and made me feel like, okay, we're in the same timeline, so to speak. It sort of reinforced that connection. So I appreciated that, and it was actually the first book that I've read that has directly referenced the pandemic and future pandemics, which unfortunately it seems like we will be in for. But I kudos to her, and I would be very interested to read more of her work, because I think there's a lot there. So yeah, good pick.
Good.
Thanks.
All right. Well,
Very cool.
James is our as our new co-host. You get to pick our book of the month. What are we in for?
Well, I have not read this book, but again, in the interest of what I was speaking about earlier, that you guys have elevated the discourse to my ears anyway about sci-fi. I wanted to go a little bit beyond and hopefully pick something that has some, some true relevance and true insight into our real world, because I think, again, that's what sci-fi should do best. Sometimes it's about lasers and aliens, but so I have picked Take Us to Your Chief and Other Stories, a short story collection by Drew Hayden Taylor. I have not read it. I think there is some probably a fair bit of indigenous themes and comment, and these are topical things, and I grapple with them, and in our role, in modern society of what has happened and what is happening. So I'm really curious to see those topics viewed through a sci-fi lens.
Awesome. So this is like a collection of short stories. I don't think we've
I
done a
think
collection
so.
of short stories in a long time. Hey, that's
Yeah,
good.
I think that's a great idea. I'm into it.
Yeah, me too. I like the title of the first one already. I'm looking at it. A culturally inappropriate Armageddon for a short story. Oh, these look great. Awesome.
No, this looks fantastic. I've ordered a paperback copy, so I'll be reading this one. Kevin, what are you gonna do?
I don't know. I'm gonna have to do something like that too. If I can't download it from Audible, I'm gonna have to read a book. Can you imagine?
There's Kindle as well.
Oh.
So
Oh, is there? Okay. All right.
Get a Kobo, man.
Yeah.
Or a Kindle, whatever. Yeah.
But yeah, I'm looking forward to this one. I'm excited to read, and this is an Indigenous Canadian author in sci-fi. I mean, this is something I'm very excited to read for sure.
Yeah, me
Really
too.
looking forward to this.
Great.
Hey guys,
first pick.
before we go though, thank you so much. It's my pleasure. Before we move on though, I wanted to go back, if we have time again, to revisit this idea, and I think you've done it in a previous episode of coming off of Sea of Tranquility. What are your thoughts on the whole simulation theory?
Oh, I mean, probabilistically, apparently, it's most likely that we are in a simulation. And I think the rationale around that is that if at any point any species ever has the technology capable of doing simulations, they would simulate till the cows come home. If they're trying to figure out how to change a blade of grass so that it turns, I don't know, so that it doesn't have a certain pest, they could just resimulate the whole universe to change a biome so that that pest goes away or something. But in doing that, there's all this collateral damage or all this collateral life creation on other planets and all this. So this is the simulation hypothesis. If you look at it from a statistical standpoint, it's more likely that there are more simulations than a base universe. And the question that I have about this is if you believe that, which I mean maybe I do, is who gives a shit, right? Like here we are, we're in a simulation, we're living our lives. To what extent does that impact us in any way? I don't really know if it does.
Well, the way that
yeah.
it does for myself, if as soon as you come to the conclusion that it is a simulation, now you just wonder about free will.
I feel like free will though it's the same problem if you're in a simulation or in the base universe. Like I think that free will question still exists in both of those. Like, and I don't understand free will, but to me, you'd have the same problem if you are in the base universe.
I'm kind of with you, Kevin. If it is a simulation, and when you read there's some good readings that suggest that yeah, there's great evidence to point to it. Does that change anything for me? I don't think it does. I'm still going to lead my life whether it's been programmed and all laid out for me or not. And I feel like I would never know. I'll never, like, it's one of those. Is there an afterlife? Is there a God? Questions. It's and maybe that's the new religion, right down the road. Some way that'll evolve into sort of new techno religion or something. And I don't know that I don't know that I'll have any impact.
I agree with all of you, and I confess that I haven't done enough reading. I'm aware of the hypothesis and have known about it for quite some time, but I think I feel the same, that like, true or not, it changes very little for me day to day. I'm not at the level of intellect or ambition to actually do anything about it. I think there's meaning in it. And Sam, I think you hit the nail on the head too, because it's kind of the same question of, is there a God? It becomes a religious question, just, turned on its head a little bit, I think.
I guess it's now looking for the glitch in the matrix to find that proof, or the crack in time, like in the book, right? That's
right.
Yeah. Although now, if we're looking for glitches in the matrix, is that like a divine sighting or a divine feeling that we would have in a religious experience? Maybe that's it continues down that analogy of a religious viewpoint.
Let's have this one figured out by this time next year, guys.
Okay.
Okay.
We'll sort it out.
Yeah, let's sort this one out.
Sounds good.
Thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you, James. We're super happy to have you with us. Thank you, Sam. Thank you, Kevin. Another great episode talking nerdy sci-fi stuff. We hope you enjoyed this episode. Join us next week. We've got a good interview, an author you might want to hear. Until next time.